Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you? I'm Anna, by the way. I'm going to be your moderator for this session.
Nice to meet you, Anna. I'm Rhoda, and I'm doing great. I decided not to do slides, so it's just going to be a discussion.
That's
Although
perfectly fine.
I've got some key points that if they're taking notes, they can
Right.
have some takeaways.
Perfect. Sounds good. Yeah, we just finished up with Danielle's session, and I believe the other one is still wrapping up. So we're going
Okay.
to give people a little bit to get in here, and then I'll start sharing the QR code so that people
Okay.
can scan it whenever they get in here. But yeah, I'll just be your moderator so that you can talk to people, say everything you have to say, and I'll keep track of the polls for you and the chat and ask any questions that come in.
Okay. That sounds great. Oh, and I didn't know. I sent Coco some poll questions this morning, but because it was so late, I don't
Oh,
know if.
they're in here. Don't worry. We
Okay,
have them put
awesome.
in. Yep.
Perfect.
Yeah, they're all in here. And if you want to see like the responses from your end, you'll have to also submit a response, and then it'll pop up all the responses for you.
Oh, perfect. Good to know. Okay. I can definitely do that. How are the other sessions going so far?
Pretty good. We've had
Great.
a couple of people interact, but it's been pretty good overall.
I know everybody gets so shy and quiet on these sessions.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
the only downside of strictly virtual. It's like polling is kind of the only way to force participation.
Right.
Um, I wasn't very nice at work. I would actually just call on people and call them out. So
Right. Yeah.
I won't do that to the students today unless it's like really bad, but
Right.
hopefully they have questions.
I've just been coming up with questions on the go as I hear more from the presenter.
Yeah,
So
that's good.
people seem to have been liking it. We'll see how it goes.
Is it raining over in Ellensburg today?
It is.
Yeah.
It's trying to rain, but also snow.
Hmm.
Like when I came in, I was getting hit with both rain and like big flakes of snow that were just melting.
That's fantastic, but not really.
Right? It's like it can't make up its mind of what it wants to be or what it wants to do.
Yeah, I'm in North Bend and we're too low of elevation to get the
Right.
snow right now, but I can see Mount Si out my window and it's covered. It's snowing up higher right now. So,
Yeah, it seems like it stopped a little bit outside.
well, that's good.
Yeah, I don't think it's cold enough for the snow to even stick if it did snow fully.
Yeah.
I mean, we still have some piles of snow just around campus from the first snowfall. So,
Oh, really?
yeah, there was a lot of snow here this winter. Most of the cars were just fully buried.
Yeah, two of my nieces actually go to Central and they stopped by. My house is on the way back home, so they stopped by yesterday. I had to FedEx them some snow boots when the snow first hit. It was the
Yeah,
one
there
thing
was
we
a
forgot
lot.
about. Yeah.
There was a lot. It was quite a challenge trying to get anywhere.
Yeah, I remember those days. They were a while ago for me though. Is that you in the chat? Are you the Wellington Wildcat?
No, so that is another person.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know because it has like an organizer title next to it.
Yeah, that's our like main account.
Hello, I am Wellington.
Hi, Wellington.
Um, my name is Desiree. I also work with Anna. I'm a student ambassador here, and
Nice to meet you, Desiree.
nice
I'm
to meet
Rhoda.
you. I'm very excited for your like presentation. So I'll definitely be sticking around for a while. But I'm just using the Wellington. So since that's the account we use to create everything,
Got it.
everything runs smoothly.
And you can be like incognito with your questions if you really, well, you can't with me because now I know who you are.
Oh, people can still send in questions anonymously. So
Oh, they can?
I
yeah,
think it's actually a really great thing. And the last session I was in, people were using that a lot, and it seemed to help them, really ask questions that they're not too sure on. So, yeah. Well, I'm
Awesome.
gonna leave the screen, let you guys take over. But Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Thanks for joining the session.
Of course.
I think. We can give people a couple of more minutes and then we can start up.
Okay, sounds good. I'm going to go on mute for a second because I'm going to
Sounds
interact in the chat here and I don't want people to hear typing.
Sounds good.
And I meant to tell you, I just realized how brilliant your guys' timing was to hold this conference on National Women's Day. And I'm so glad I figured that out before we got together with everyone. That's the only downside of the virtual, though. You can't see I have this really cool Stevie Nicks, Don't Be a Lady, Be a Legend t-shirt on today.
That's so cool.
Yeah, I thought it was fitting for the audience. Thanks, Crystal.
And Crystal's actually the president of the Women in Business Club.
Oh, fantastic. So happy you can join us today, Crystal.
I'm very excited that this is going so well. And yes, we purposely planned it for Women's Day as well.
I kind of figured, I was like, I'm sure they told me that the first time we talked about it. I just forgot, but I had one of those, oh, that was so smart.
Okay, I think we should be good to start now. So hello, everybody. Today we have Rhoda here. She's going to be discussing how to balance your work and life. Here on the screen, you can see the Edge QR code, so feel free to scan this. I will also be showing it at the end of the presentation once again. If you have any questions, please feel free to type them out in the Q&A section, and also please do take part in the polls that we have. Anyways, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Anna. And this is my first time on this platform, so I am not able to see how many folks we have or any of that good stuff. So
about 13-ish.
Okay. Oh, I can see that up top now. Thank you. Now I know what that number means. Welcome, you guys. Hello. I'm going to do a little introduction of myself for those of you that are not LinkedIn stalkers and already went and checked out my profile. So I am a graduate of Central, go Wildcats, and have worked in business ever since I graduated college, specifically in human resources. It was something funny when I was trying to figure out my major. When I first started at Central, I was an accounting major. I thought that was going to be a good career and profession to earn a good living. And I understood math very well and took a little accounting class in high school and thought it was great. And I got through my first 3 accounting courses and I realized accounting was not for me. I wanted to pursue something where I was interacting with more people on a more regular basis. And I share that with you because it's important to not force yourself into a track that you or your parents thought was the right thing for you to go do for a career. That major shift and focus was the beginning of what I didn't know was going to be a really long and successful career in human resources. So my most recent position that I've held was the senior vice president at T-Mobile. I led all of the HR business partners there, which was the job I dreamed up for myself when I first started at the company 14 years ago. And it was a really cool position because I was basically the HR business partner for the CEO and all of his direct reports, as well as leading a function of over 200 HR business partners. So as an HR professional, of course, work-life balance is very near and dear to my heart because people are kind of my business. And I'm going to share some of my personal journey with you today as well, because I need to let you know this is a really hard thing to tackle, and it's very individual to you and your desires, your dreams, your passions. And so there is not an equation I'm going to give you today that will balance your life and work perfectly, because it doesn't exist. But hopefully I can share with you some of the learnings I've had along the way in my career that have helped, and also some stories of what happens when you don't pay attention to your work-life balance, and the negative impacts that it can have on you and your body and your life and your family. So it's really interesting to think about how to talk to almost grads, recent grads, about to be grads about this topic, because I didn't really understand it until about 20 years into my career, which is just a couple of years ago. And so it can feel really overwhelming as a topic. Coco and I were talking a lot before the conference today about what would be most helpful and what's most frustrating about this topic currently, which may be some articles that you've read on LinkedIn that is like, do steps 1 through 4 and you will be perfectly balanced. And then you get really disappointed when you complete that 4th step and you find out that actually didn't help. So first and foremost, you really need to get clear on what your dreams are. What is the type of life that you want to live for yourself? Because that answer to that question is different for everyone. For me personally, I wanted to build a life that was completely opposite of the one that I knew growing up. And it's not because I had a traumatic childhood or an unloving home, but the way of life that my parents led and lived was not what I wanted for myself. I'll explain that a little bit so you don't think they're bad people. I grew up on a farm, and a dairy farm in particular, and I was actually like in 4-H and showed cows, the whole 9 yards, up until I was 12 years old. And so my parents lived very simply. They always lived a debt-free life, which was a fantastic model for me to have. But it was a very, very simple life. And I had big dreams of taking luxurious vacations and, you know, splurging on that expensive designer handbag and things like that. And so what was important for me as far as what I was going to accomplish in my career was what I described to you as a lot of materialistic things, but that was not what I was after necessarily. It was more of a way of life, of being able to travel and do the things I wanted to do without having to worry massively about the budget being too tight or being unable to do those things. And my own personal desires and passions are also kind of expensive. And so money was a real thing for me from the get-go. And it took me a good 15 to 20 years to start getting to the earning level that I actually wanted for myself. But I entered a profession where I knew that possibility existed. Now, I have friends that are on the complete opposite spectrum from a dreams perspective, and they did it very differently. They didn't care so much about being able to travel and do those things all the time and drive fast cars. And they focused more on finding a job that would provide the hours that they needed to accomplish the goals and dreams that they had, which was very different. And so get clear for yourself, is your career and your job going to be the thing that enables you to live the life of your dreams? Or is a career and the job going to be the thing that enables you to live out the life and the dreams in the structure and the style that you want? And so I had big aspirations of becoming a head of human resources, pretty much from when I graduated. And I kind of architected what experiences from a work perspective I needed to get there. And I was very crystal clear on my own personal values and ethics. So those are like step 1 and 2. Dream up the life that you want for yourself, to understand, all right, what is the income bracket I'm going to need to aspire to be in to support those hopes and dreams, and understand what's most important to you from a values and ethics perspective so that you find the right place to help you make that happen. Because being in the right culture is almost as important as being in the right job when it comes to work-life balance. And there are questions that you can ask during interview processes to make sure that what you've read on the company website is actually what employees are experiencing every day. One of my favorites is asking people that I'm interviewing with, what has kept you here so long? Because that question will you'll typically get pretty authentic answers. You'll also be able to tell when people are maybe not being super forthcoming about some of the not good parts of the culture. And ask questions about, like, if you could change one thing in the company culture, what would that be? That will give you a realistic understanding of how much that company actually lives and breathes those values. So for me early on, I'll be honest, I was trying to think back, like I had an internship, which, by the way, highly recommend. If you guys can secure one of those for yourselves, it's literally the best thing you can ever do for yourself in your career. I didn't have any HR experience before I started working out in the real world. I had worked I was like the front desk person at a construction company, and I had been a nanny for a summer. Like, I really didn't have any business experience other than, office responsibilities. And so my internship was the thing that provided that for me. And because of my amazing education I received from Central and all of the HR credits I had already done, I was able to operate as a full-blown recruiter right out of college for a local banking institution. And it was the springboard to the next step at a really cool startup. Now, I'll tell you, work-life balance back then to me wasn't very well defined. It was more about getting the experiences I knew I needed to continue to move forward in this HR career that I really wanted for myself. However, my first job was at a startup company. So after the internship ended, they didn't have any full-time positions available, or I would have stayed there. But a high-tech startup company contacted me. I was employee number 32, which was amazing and scary all at the same time. From an HR perspective, it was myself, a recruiter, and our head of human resources, and that was it. And so the cool thing about startups is that, especially early on in your career, they provide you a ton of opportunity to experience new things. And if any of you have ever heard about what startups are like, put yourself back in, 2001. That was when I was entering the workforce. I'm not kidding you guys. This startup was amazing. We had a kegerator in our break room. We had fully stocked fridge of any sort of food or snack that we wanted. We could actually make a list and it would magically appear there every Monday. They had a lot of benefits in the building. So like there was a dry cleaner on site. They brought a lot of life chores to the office so that you kind of didn't have a reason or excuse to leave other than to go home and sleep at night. So it was a good and bad experience in terms of getting great work experience. But I also had to learn for the very first time that sometimes you have to say no. And that's really hard in a startup environment because you're a small team. And I was young. I actually got married very, very young. So I was actually already married by the time I started this job, but it was just me and my husband. And I loved what I was doing. And so for me in the beginning, I loved working 50 to 60 hour weeks because it was bringing me joy. Like it was building my confidence. It was helping me kind of reaffirm that this is the career that I want for myself. And I enjoyed the people I worked with. It was really great. After about, 4 or 5 months there, things started getting really, really intense because we were on a hiring ramp. And because there was only 2 of us, I was working a lot of very long hours, and I was finding myself wanting to continuing that work on the weekend, not necessarily because the company was asking me to, but because I just wanted to show up to the best of my ability. And that was all fine and dandy and still until the day job started really demanding a lot more. And the weird thing about a startup is you almost have to like work to your max before you can start to understand and justify, okay, I think we need to add somebody else to the team. And so I was taking on project after project because I wanted the experience. And it was actually my coworker who had to kind of tap me on the shoulder one day and say, I think you're doing a little too much, which you won't hear that a lot in the workplace. Again, small company. I was fortunate to have a manager that really cared for my well-being. And they were like, I've noticed like you don't seem like you're feeling well. And they weren't wrong. I was eating horribly because we had so much bad food in that office. And I didn't have time for exercise. And so I wasn't getting any sort of mental, I call it a release valve. When you're working, even when you love what you do, your mind's really consumed and it gets very, very occupied. And I'm sure a lot of you are great multitaskers. And if you're not one of those people that makes lists and keeps it all in your head like I do, it's really bad because eventually there's just too much and nothing else will fit in. And so my coworker was actually concerned for my physical health and told me to go to the doctor. And I did. And I had all these sorts of new things that had popped up and I was really young and they started asking about my job. And even though I loved it and I didn't realize that even positive stress can affect your body, I had to like take my foot off the gas pedal and get things back under control from a nutrition perspective. I started going to the gym again. And that was caught before it became an issue. But I was really thankful to that coworker who pulled me aside and was like, you need to slow down. Like this is not a sustainable pace because there's a couple of different myths about work-life balance. And if you are an overachiever and you are somebody that takes pride in being able to do it all, was one of those people. I'm a little more self-aware now. You can literally work yourself to death. And having a support system, whether it's a coworker or a family member who really starts to notice when you get out of whack, is really, really, really important because, like I said, I didn't feel bad. I wasn't bitter about the hours I was working. I was volunteering to work those hours. And unfortunately, that startup closed its doors 2 months later. So I don't have a long story to tell you there, other than I was very thankful for her. And the thing that really kind of brought it all home for me was when the company, they basically laid off all but like 12 employees. And by that time we had grown to over a couple hundred. Your job's not going to be there for you forever. And making sure you maintain and keep those relationships that are most important to you, even when you are like full speed ahead on your career and super focused there, those are the things that last forever. And so keeping your job and your employer in perspective is really, really important because especially when you're first starting out, it is so easy to get so wrapped up in being the best and, doing all the extra work that people ask for, that you have to remember that, you do have a limit. The good thing is I took that learning into my next job, which happened to be back with my old employer that I did the internship at because they called me as soon as they had an opening, which was awesome. And I had much better perspective and a great manager who was very focused on work-life balance. Hopefully some of you guys will benefit from that throughout your career, is actually having a really, really good manager. Because like I said, it's a hard thing to manage for yourself, especially if you're super ambitious when you're first starting out. My next kind of what I will say challenge from a work-life balance perspective really happened in that role. I was a recruiter there and I was recruiting for all different functions at the bank, but I was having to travel, not by airplane, but by car. We started opening up a bunch of new locations. And that put a different strain on my schedule than I'd ever experienced before because I was doing interviews in multiple locations throughout a day. And I ended up understanding a lot about myself because the job became kind of monotonous to me because I was filling a lot of the like positions. And so I learned there that it was probably time to move on to the next HR discipline. I had this overarching goal when I started out, if there's any HR majors on the phone, that I knew I wanted to be an HR business partner, but I knew in order to be a really good HR business partner, I needed to go work in other HR functions first and build my experience level to prepare me to be that kind of HR generalist or HR business partner. And so I started in recruiting. My next step was to a consulting firm that was a global company, which I was really excited about, as a systems and business analyst for HR. So something totally different than recruiting. And because of the global presence, that posed a lot of work-life challenges for me. I was having to be on calls with India at 11 o'clock at night or 1 a.m. and learning how, okay, if I'm going to be on a call from 11 p.m. to 2 a.m., I definitely need to stop working earlier in the day and carve out some time for some rest. And a consulting firm is kind of on 24/7. And so that company was really great. They even had a program that would give you money to go purchase things to help with your work-life balance. So I got to go expense a snowboard bindings, snowboard boots. I think it was 3,000 every 5 years. It was a decent benefit. And so I learned there the whole concept of work hard, play hard. Because again, I was very, very ambitious. And so I didn't mind working hours. I was working in downtown Seattle. I was commuting from the South End. And so just my commute alone sucked up a couple of hours per day. And the late night phone calls. And so I just didn't understand until later in my career how much those things take a toll on you, because I was one of those people back then. There was this old school mentality of like, because I'm mentally strong, I can handle anything. And that is a freaking lie. I'm trying really hard not to swear, you guys. I have a potty mouth, but I promised myself I was not going to curse today. It's easy to get sucked into that of like, oh, people that always talk about work-life balance, it's just because they're lazy. Or I can't ask about work-life balance in an interview because I'm going to be perceived negatively. It's all total nonsense. So if you take care of yourself and you're carving out time for yourself, you're finding those things, those release valves, whether it's exercise or some hobby or activity, you can actually be more productive for the time that you're working than if you're exhausted and stressed out and tired all the time. And these things take a long time. I started by telling you guys, it took me 20 years to learn this stuff. So be patient with yourself and be kind with yourself. The most important thing is to be self-aware and to be in touch with your mental state and with your physical state. Because shortly after I left the consulting firm, I did one of those like stupid mistake jobs, which everybody will do. But I took an HR systems role when I was just trying to escape a bad leadership situation. And I regretted it horrifically. And that's when I started in HR business partner work at T-Mobile, which I was trying that company out and I was interviewing that company just as hardcore as they were interviewing me, because I was truly looking for an employment home where I could grow my career, reach my goals that I had set for myself, and have some semblance of work-life balance. The thing I forgot to mention early on, I don't actually care for the term work-life balance because it's nonsense. You can't ever have everything perfectly balanced. It's literally impossible. You can have work-life integration though. And especially for those of you who are really focused on professional type roles, you'll most likely find yourself in an exempt or salaried position pretty early on in your career, which means you're not recording every hour that you work and you're expected to manage your time and get your work done yourself. And sometimes that means 50-hour weeks. Sometimes that might mean a 30 or 35-hour week. The key is to finding what works for you. And I learned a lot about that at T-Mobile, probably because I was there for 14 years and I probably dealt with the largest life events of my life while I was there. And I want to take a little bit of time to talk about life because you can't control it, you can't predict it, and it happens. And usually when it happens like that, it's not good, right? It's not, oh, money fell out of the sky today. I wasn't expecting. That's fantastic. Let's go celebrate. That's not what happens when people say life happens. Things like deaths, things like unexpected expenses, or, there's a whole plethora of things that can happen. And how you are able to cope and manage with those things while you're in the middle of your career depends on how well you've been managing work and life. And so for me, that was a lot of things that happened during my tenure at T-Mobile. And I had a really great leader and mentor that introduced the concept of work-life integration to me. Because he's like, Rhoda, that's so silly. So first of all, you're a salaried employee. If you need to take a doctor's appointment, you don't need to take a whole day off of work to go do that. Go to your doctor's appointment for an hour and a half and come back. And because I was so worried before about, being one of those people that was seen as like, oh my gosh, she's gone all the time. Or you'll get environments. Now it's weird because we're still in mostly virtual environments and people can't do this. But in the office, you'll have those people on the team or the department that like they're desk watchers and they think it's their job to monitor your comings and goings. And guess what? It's not, unless they're your manager. And that's the person you want to communicate with. So during my tenure at T-Mobile, I dealt with a sudden tragic death of my brother. I dealt with the birth of a child, which was good stress, but a lot of stress because it was the first time I'd ever done that in my life. I dealt with a couple of major surgeries for major health issues and, dealing with elderly parents. I'm sure you guys might not be in that phase yet, but trust me, it'll come. And it takes kind of a lot out of you. And so each time I had one of those life events happen to me, I learned more about work-life balance because it reminds you of what's most important. And it reminds you that you have to prioritize your time and your energy around what is most important. And this is why it's so difficult, because if you are like me and you have super ambitious career aspirations and you want to be working at the top of an organization, you are going to have to work long hours. But that doesn't mean that you can't find balance and you can't integrate your life. And here's what it looked like for me. I started moving my doctor's offices closer to my place of employment so that it was easier for me to do those midday afternoon appointments. I started outsourcing things as soon as I was at an income level that afforded me to. So we always had a nanny. I didn't have to worry with the stress of daycare. Part of that was waiting to have children. I was 32 when I had my first child. So there were sacrifices. I knew that I was putting my family on hold on purpose for my career, but I was only willing to do that to a certain point. I learned the physical issues that can arise from stress. I didn't believe that before. I was really ignorant and just thought that as long as I told myself that I could do it and it was okay, it would be okay. And while that works for a lot of things, it does stop working at a point when your body is like, enough is enough. And I actually experienced that in February of last year. And it's not because I wasn't self-aware. It was because I put my company first and I put my company before myself. And I did that because the company was in a bit of chaos and crisis. You can imagine going through a pandemic and being a senior HR leader was about the worst position besides the CEO that you could be in. I found myself in February of 2020 in a brand new position. I got promoted into the senior vice president role. I actually had responsibility for recruiting at that time too. And T-Mobile closed a merger with Sprint on April 1st of 2020. And I had over 400 people reporting to me. So it was over half of the HR function. And we closed a merger over WebEx, which was never in the planning. And we had to come up with COVID policies. We had to come up with COVID pay policies for our retail employees. And I had never done that before. You guys, you go through your business continuity planning class, right? I'm sure all of you will have that at some point or another. Those business continuity plans are way more important than you think they are. We quickly realized ours was not up to par for dealing with the pandemic and had to write everything from scratch. And it was exhilarating and rewarding because I was side by side with the CEO and his direct reports. But, after 6 weeks of 15, 16-hour days with no stop on the weekend, my body started to reject this notion of that pace, I guess you could say. And so it took me, you guys, another year to slow down and take the break that I needed. And it ended up being 4 weeks off of work. And I was so thankful that I was at T-Mobile because T-Mobile is a very family-oriented company. I'm actually no longer with the organization, but I still love and adore them. And we'll talk about them fiercely forever because I had all of the support in the world. What you find out when you go through something like that is that you're the only person putting that level of pressure on yourself. And when you start opening up to people about how it's impacting you, they go into crisis management mode. I had chief officers calling me, checking in on me and are you okay? Are you going to be okay? What do you need? What can I take off your plate? Because I was more concerned about leading for the company and leading my team than my own physical health. And so I was kind of laughing when we were talking about this topic. I was like, oh yeah, I don't know if I would have had as much to say on this topic before last year. But I've learned firsthand that your body does have its limits, regardless of how mentally tough you are. Go back to the beginning of our discussion. Remember, I grew up on a farm. I'm actually half Serbian. My father's grandparents migrated here in the very early 1900s. And in my dad's family, toughness is that's how you describe us, right? And so it's really a farce to think that you can just keep going and going and going and going, and there's never going to be a consequence. And so learning how to integrate your work into your life and vice versa, and finding an employer that actually cares about you as a human being. That is probably the most important thing. If you take nothing else away from this discussion today, you need to find a company that is aligned with your value system and your ethics. And it's why I'm so thankful to T-Mobile. Like I said, I was the one putting that pressure on myself because I wanted to do such a good job and I wanted to support everybody in the business. And I'm so thankful that the company was there to support me when I needed them to, but not every employer is like that. And asking those questions about the culture, and don't ask them to the person that's going to be your manager. Hopefully you get the opportunity to meet with other people that are maybe going to be your peers and teammates. But, the way I've worked it with my family, you guys, when my daughter was little, I would come home earlier from the office and put her to bed at 7:30, and then I would work for 2 more hours. And that's how I made the new mom thing work. And my work was totally great with it. They were actually getting a little more time from me than a standard work day by me doing that. And I didn't feel like I was missing out on anything as a mom because I was able to be there for her and cook her dinner and read her a bedtime story and do all of those things. And it's also how I kept up my workout regimen. I would go to the gym at 8 or 9 o'clock at night. Some people think that's crazy, but the people that wake up at 4:30 a.m. or 5 a.m., I think they're crazy. So again, it's all individual to you. You have to figure out what's important to you, how you live your lifestyle, and how you work in life during work, and make sure that work's not taking up too much life outside of work. Because the reality is, if you want to be a senior executive, you're going to have to figure this out, because it's not going to be a Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 job. It's just not. And that's the reality. But there is flexibility to make it work within your schedule and your lifestyle. The other thing is, you guys, I took my first vacation unemployed 4 months ago. And it was the most amazing thing I've ever done in my life because I was always responding to texts. I was checking emails once a day. I was taking 1 or 2 phone calls per day, not because my company made me, because I wanted to, because I thought that's what I needed to do to be a good leader, until I finally built a team strong enough around me to tell me to stop it. I was actually inhibiting their growth because they weren't allowed to step up in my absence. And so there's all sorts of things, positive things that can happen when you step away from work that aren't about you and are about the team. And those are boundaries in my next role. I'm not going to be searching for something new until the summertime. I'm intentionally taking some time off. And my next role will be a head of HR position at some sort of local technology company. And so there are certain boundaries in my brain that I'm already kind of putting in place. And vacation time is going to be one of them, because if you don't ever fully unplug from work, you're never going to get rested. You're never going to give yourself that mental break that you need in order to be better when you come back. You should come back from vacation like so excited and so raring to go because you had that mental break. And so boundaries, I know there are other speakers today talking about setting boundaries, and it is the other thing besides self-awareness that will help you maintain this for yourself. The other thing is like leverage your mentors and leverage your coworkers and ask them what they do. Everybody has their own kind of secrets and tricks that they've figured out over the years. But the biggest one is just to listen to yourself and listen to your body. And if when I'm talking about these long hour days, like if that makes you sick to your stomach, then find a career where you can come in, do your job, go home, and disconnect every single day. My husband used to have one of those jobs. He doesn't anymore because he decided he wanted to run his own construction company. But when he worked in construction for somebody else, he was able to do that every single day. And I was so envious of him, and he never understood, like, why are you still talking about work? You've been off for 2 hours. And I'm like, well, I'm never really off. We're the ones that impose those silly rules on ourselves. So be nice to yourself. You can work really hard. You can accelerate through your career without finding that unbalance, I'll say, because we all know that perfect balance doesn't exist. But a lot of it comes down to the work environment too. Because there's so many companies. There are some companies that are so great at this. When I was at T-Mobile, we were starting to look at some of these things during the summer where they'll do no meetings Fridays. And that's not to say you're not going to work on Friday, but when you're in a busy corporate job, you're kind of in meetings like 24/7. It's really stupid. It's the one thing that nobody's figured out. So if you guys can figure out how to have less meetings, like you will be so successful. But there's no big corporation that I've found yet. But they started to implement things like no meeting Fridays so that you can get caught up on your email and your work, because that tends to be where people spend the after hours, is in their inbox. And if you're one of those people that has to have their inbox cleaned out all the time, you better start taking some deep breathing now, because there's a lot of positions where that is not possible. HR business partner work is one of them. But these are the things that you need to kind of think through. Like, what do you want to be doing when you're away from work? And how much of your time do you want that to be? And you can find the right career around that, or you can create both. If you are an entrepreneur and you want to start your own business doing something that you love, make sure you love it, because being your own business owner is a ton of work. And it's almost like another kind of family commitment. However, my husband did it to have more work-life balance, meaning he was never able to take time off. So he would get jealous of me. I could take 2-week vacations because I received a lot of paid time off at T-Mobile. They're very generous there. He was never allowed to take more than 1 week off of work. And so for him, owning his own business, while it's been stressful and demanding, we're taking off out of town for 5 days this week. And, he'll take care of things while we're gone, but he'll also get to play really hard too. So that was a lot of talking. You guys don't know me well. I typically hate hearing myself talk for this long. I very much wanted this to be a dialogue. It's actually part of the reason I didn't do any slides. And I'm assuming you guys have questions, and you may have questions you don't want to ask, which I've heard there's a way to do anonymous questions in the chat. So feel free to do that well. Or if you're brave, I think, Anna, is it okay if they come off of mute to ask a question?
Yeah, but I'm not sure exactly if they can do
If
that.
they're able to? Okay.
Yeah, since primarily only speakers can actually be on screen and off mute.
So maybe let's get the Q&A warmed up with a couple of polls, because I have a couple of questions I would love to know your answers to.
Yeah, so we have all 3 Q&A questions from the polls answered. The first one was, what is the most important to you? Like, what's most important to you in your life? Most of the people chose all of the above. It was a very strong 58.3%, with a close second from happiness, which was 33.3.
Awesome. So that's what I expected it to be, by the way. And this is an example of when you're trying to prioritize things, it can be really challenging because all those things are important. And in order to maintain those 3, you definitely have to have self-awareness of where you're at. You have to set boundaries for yourself, and you have to find an employer that aligns with your values. Let's see. What about the next one?
The next one was, when you hear the term work-life balance, what goes through your mind first? We had a very strong winner with 50% was, I must have work-life balance when I start my career. The second runner-up was, it's my biggest fear is that I won't have any balance.
Oh my gosh, this is so great, you guys, because I didn't know what to expect with this one for sure. And I love that you're setting it as a requirement. I have great hopes for this generation that they're going to do better than mine did in this regard. And hopefully that's because you're a little more educated on mental health and the effects that it has on you. But I think that is so great. And I would ask each of you to make sure before you go into interviews, I'm assuming most of you guys prepare interview questions before you go in. Go back and check those and make sure that you have ones about the company culture and specifically about taking time off and balance and what that looks like at that company. Because it's really interesting. A lot of the technology companies have done what, the startups did back in the day, which is like bring everything on site, especially if you're ever fortunate enough to go visit like the Google headquarters down in Mountain View or the Facebook headquarters. There are these beautiful, gorgeous facilities. They have everything you would ever need on site, including like meal delivery, dry cleaning, daycares. I mean, literally everything is there. And that is fantastic. But you also need to understand like, okay, great. If all these things are here, like how do people unplug and get time away and not being just wooed in by the fancy facilities? And take a really hard look at the benefits package. Usually a company's benefits package will actually inform how much time off they encourage, not just in like the paid time off or vacation time, but in the other benefits that they provide you as well. Like, do they give you a gym membership discount, or do they have an on-site workout facility? That's the other thing I learned, you guys, when I had to take time off. I wasn't doing anything to like recharge my own batteries. And so I now go to a trainer twice a week. I do yoga twice a week, which I fell in love with when I was at Central and took it as my PE credit. So make sure that you never lose sight of those things that help you feel better, both mentally and physically, when you're starting your career. They're kind of the thing that will be, it's kind of like a little lifesaver, not going to lie. Those activities where you really can't focus on anything else, those are the things you need to preserve and make sure you're making time for. And then Anna, I think we had one more, didn't we?
Yes, we had the last one, which was, who's the most important person in defining your work-life balance? We had a strong win with 66.7% from me and myself. And then the second runner-up was my partner.
Oh, interesting. That's a better second runner-up than your boss, that's for sure. Yeah, that is another myth or trap I think people fall into sometimes. They forget that they're in control. There are some things that are not in your control. But you are the only one that knows how you're feeling. You're the only one that knows when you need a break. And you're the only one that knows what activities you love to do. You guys are so funny. For so many years before I became a parent, I had all these fears that when I did actually become a mom, that I wasn't going to have time to do any of the extracurricular stuff with my child, which was complete nonsense. I was able to coach my daughter's basketball team when she was in second grade. And it was so much fun because I played basketball like all through junior high and high school. I loved it. I hadn't played since high school. And just being back in the gym and those familiar sounds and smells, it was so fantastic. And when I signed up, I had told them, I'm like, hey, I have a really busy job, but I want to make sure I can commit to this because I don't want to be late for practice or, late for games. Games were on the weekends and I got to control the practice schedule. So I was like, oh, like it's up to me. And I did practices at 6 p.m. I was able to check in with all the parents to make sure that that worked for them. I had time to come home, change, grab my child. And so it kind of like made fun of myself after that because I was like, I thought these things weren't going to be possible. And it really is up to you and you get to define it, and don't ever hand that control over to anyone else. Your partner is a good second in command for sure, because you want to maintain those healthy, strong relationships outside of work. My husband and I joke, we've been married, gosh, almost 22 years now. And he is definitely the one that puts me in check sometimes when I can't put myself in check. So make sure you have those people around you as well, that care enough about you to notice when you start to change. I don't know about you guys, but like I am the worst to my family, especially my partner. My husband, that poor guy, he takes the brunt of all of it because I know he can handle it and I know he won't take it personally. But like my family starts to notice. I get a little short when I'm really stressed out and overworked. And like I said, I had so many physical things. I had TMJ flare up. I had my back flare up. I mean, I had all sorts of things go wrong. I'm only 44 years old. I should not have been falling apart like that. So yeah, I love that you guys know you're in control, and just don't give that up to anybody else.
And then we do have some questions from our audience. The
Excellent.
first one is, do you ever talk to your coworkers about your home life? If yes, did it help with home life, and did it affect or strengthen your relationship with your coworkers?
Great question. And I'm going to give a little bit of a nuanced and complicated answer because of what I did for the company. So the short answer is yes, absolutely. You have to remember that you spend more time with your coworkers than you do your family, because most of the time at home, the majority of it is spent sleeping Monday through Friday. And so I'm very supportive of building and forming those relationships at work. They can be great sources of advice, especially. So like for me, I had children a little later. And so I had all these new mom questions, and I was surrounded by all of these awesome kick-ass women that were mothers. And I really leveraged them a lot when I had my child. The nuance and the caveat to my answer is, if you're in a leadership position or you aspire to be in a big leadership position, you do need to draw some boundaries with those personal relationships at work, specifically if you work in HR. This isn't quite as true in other disciplines. It is true if you want to really be at that top level in the organization, only because there needs to be some sort of line of professionalism. And I'm a big fan of vulnerability. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't share or you shouldn't be vulnerable with people. But for me, for example, I led all of the HR business partners. There are some of the HR business partners that I actually started the company with that were on my team. And we had formed friendships early on in my tenure at T-Mobile and my career. And T-Mobile is a very social media focused company. And I had a leader who told me, Rhoda, if you want to be a senior HR executive here, you should not have any coworkers on your Facebook page. And I was like, oh, okay. Because my Facebook page is my personal page. I don't do work stuff there. And because I had formed some of these relationships early on, I had a couple of people. And so I was like, well, just keep it this small group. Well, when I got promoted, other people that I was connected with were connected with that person. And I started getting all these inquiries that I was having to turn down from my teammates. And I felt really yucky about that. And I actually had to explain it on an all hands call. And it wasn't because I didn't want them to know about my personal life. It was more that I personally needed some sort of separation between what was going on at home and what was going on at work. And if I had all of my team on my Facebook page, I didn't have any separation. And so the answer is absolutely yes, but you always need to treat those relationships like you would any other, meaning take time to build trust and to share those deeply personal things, because it can be a challenge if you're going to be that person's leader in the future. That's what happened to me. A really good friend I made when I started at the company, and we had joked about the fact that I may be her leader someday. But when it happened, we had issues. And it took her 6 months to be able to see me as her manager and not just her friend and colleague. And so that's the only caveat I give there. And also, you don't want to be that person. It's like vomit of the mouth with personal information, because sometimes people are like, whoa, I was just asking if you were okay today. So make sure you're representing your personal brand at work when you're sharing those things. But there's people that meet their spouses and partners at work. There's people that form best friend relationships there. And as long as you're not in a position where that's going to cause any sort of conflict of interest down the road, I think it's totally great to have that support. You need support wherever you can get it. And those are the people that are going to be able to most easily relate to you. You just want to make sure that you keep some professional boundaries, especially if you aspire to leadership.
And I think this is going to be our last question, and then we're going to wrap it up. It's, I missed that. What is the good question to ask at an interview regarding work-life balance?
Yeah. So one question I always like to ask every single interviewer that interviews me, even the recruiter, is what has kept you with the company? That will typically reveal some of the best parts about the organization. And then you also, you need to ask people questions about how they're able to manage work and life, because their answer is going to indicate to you the company's level of support for those things. And then scour that benefits package. It's so funny. It's a really simple question to ask somebody, what's kept you here so long? But you'll get different answers from people, but they should kind of be similar. Oh, and then scour those value statements and pick one that you really like and ask somebody to give you an example of how that comes to life in the workplace. They might get mad at you because that's a hard question, but it's a really good one to ask. And kind of same with the mission statement. Like, if a value statement or a mission statement is just something on the wall, you need to ask those questions to determine that, are those just words that you see in the building when you enter, or is this actually a part of the DNA? And I wanted to address a comment Angela made really fast before we get out. She said, adding Teams to my phone was such a bad choice. I'm always checking even when I'm at the grocery store. Knock it off. I actually had a boss that made me take my email off of my phone for a vacation. She actually blocked my access. If you're doing it because you're bored, fine. But like, if you have a child with you at the grocery store, you're taking away from attention for them. So really try to call yourself out on that. I had a coworker that used to do the rubber band snap trick. And every time she'd check her email outside of work, she'd snap herself. All that ended up doing was giving her a bruise. So I don't recommend that approach, but Yeah, it's a bad habit and it only gets worse.
Well, thank you everyone for being here. Thank you, Rona, for being here, sharing your experience and everything you've learned through your professional life. Here's the QR code for everyone who's here for Edge and didn't get a chance to scan it earlier. But once again, thank you for being here. Thank you for taking some time out of your busy schedule and taking part of this event. Now, if you could all move over back to the stage, we will have our closing session, which will be the 5 for 5.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.